Oh, snowpocalypse. That's what I'm talking about right there.
How's the weather out there?
I think we got about 14 inches so far at the house, something like that.
Dang, that's
More more
impressive.
than the last 2 years combined. Here, I'll show you some pictures here real quick. So
Ooh,
this
purdy.
is our garden, and you can see the little hats on these little covers we built for some of the plants. So this was like
That's
mid storm, and then this is like our lower area. I had to park the car at the bottom of the driveway because where these shoe marks are, that's my driveway. I got after I had to take my son to work because I wasn't going to let him drive the car to work in these conditions.
understand
So I
understandable.
I dropped him off. I came back up. I drove up the driveway about 30 or 40 feet. Car wouldn't go any further. I was just spinning. This is all wheel drive. It's a Subaru, right? And so
Right.
I just put my foot on the brake, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go back. I I forgot to put the car in reverse. All I did was let my foot off the brake, and the
Hmm.
car slid all the way back down.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, that was great. My mom can't get out of their place at all. The driveway's too long. There's too much snow. So I went up there to kickstart the generator, the brand new generator that we put in this summer that was designed to go in when the power went out. Well, the
yep.
power went out because trees have
And
been falling over onto the power lines. And I
generator
went
didn't
up,
kick
I'm
in.
like, I'm like, did the generator come on? No. And so I had to go over there the next day and actually get it going. So anyway, now I have another project, which is to figure out why the generator didn't go on. But they didn't have power for 48 hours at her place.
Ooh.
Yeah, so not awesome.
Well, I did tell
Uh,
you the story that my furnace went out,
oh
and
yeah,
I've
yeah,
been
right.
been without heat for a week and a half.
Oh my gosh. And what are
Yeah.
what are the how is it in Detroit right now?
I mean, we're at freezing right now, but well, when it went out, that was fun because that was the cold snap where we were having below zero temperatures, and we got space heaters, we had the fireplace going, we had everything going, and it basically knocked the chill out of the air to get it roughly around like a constant 54 in the house. You know,
Not downstairs. What's the upstairs? What's the temperature difference between upstairs and downstairs?
you want me to admit that we have two units and one
Yeah,
was perfectly fine and one wasn't,
got to
and that the
keep you
kids
honest.
and that the and that and that the and that the kids themselves were, cold while we were nice and toasty upstairs.
Yes.
So if you want me to, admit that, uh, I mean, sure. Uh, Actually, what was funny is that we would like everybody would come upstairs and we would just huddle around the room upstairs, and it was fun. We haven't done that. We've got adult children like you do, and our youngest is a junior in high school, so like none of them are interested in actually like hanging out with their parents. So until the furnace goes out, then they're like,
Right.
"Hey, how are you guys doing?" Uh, so we went
Totally.
and we went and we invested, which honestly, it's kind of a good investment in a way. Power was on, which was good. I know, unlike your situation. But so the power was on. And then we went to Lowe's and bought two of those kind of electric, kind of like fake fireplaces. So it looks like you got the logs in there and it looks like, the crackling fire and stuff.
My
But
mom
it's a
has one
heater.
of those. Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's a heater. And
yeah.
you can crank it all the way up to like 80 or something. And we put them downstairs and it actually started like just been running them nonstop for a week and a half. I mean,
Uh,
my electric bill's just like tick, 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 by running all
totally.
of these space heaters. But the big worry was obviously I need to get the chill out of the air so that the pipes don't freeze. And so
Yeah.
anywhere where there was pipes, I wanted to make sure that I got some heat to those areas. And thankfully, these little electric fireplaces, they might not be
They're
the most attractive, but they work.
they're kind of portable. Like they're not super
Oh
easy
yeah.
to move, right? But you can put them where you need them. So you could have a
Yeah.
fireplace in the dining room. You could have a
Yep.
fireplace in the kitchen. You could in the
Absolutely.
bathroom. You could put a fireplace in the
Yeah.
bathroom. It's nice.
And honestly, there was sort of at a point we were like, stopped running the actual fireplace, wood burning log
Mm-hmm.
fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped using that one because it was just getting kind of, the wind was kicking pretty hard. And I mean, there's multiple days where we were a gale advisory for wind. I mean, you can hear like just wind coming through. You think that you have nice sealed windows. Yeah. Like you go through some gale winds, you'll figure out where the draft's coming from.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
Uh,
How old is your house? What year was it built?
1941.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're new wind.
My house was 47 and it had some old single pane windows when we were in Southern California, but the weather is a little different in Southern California
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have new windows and they're still leaking.
They are new windows. I mean, they're double pane, double hung windows, but you can, it tests them. I keep looking over. It's like, you can like, hey,
You said double hung windows and you just totally like unlocked a piece of my memory from an ARE exam. You know, when
yeah.
when you have to like we had to study all the window types. It's like casement, fixed, double hung,
Yeah.
like all these. And it was like you had little. We all had the flashcards back then, right? And you would be like,
that.
"What's this?" And same for brick coursing. It was like, "What's this coursing called? What's this coursing called?"
Quick! Can you identify a Flemish bond on the streets?
Right. PTSD. That's PTSD right there.
That's funny.
What is that? Yeah, ARE PTSD. That's a good like domain name. I'm gonna before we release that episode, we should probably lock that in. AREPTSD.com. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna do that.
So there's a question, and this is the moment where I'm gonna push the button right here and bring up the QR code and ask Archispeak.com. Something we've been talking about recently on the podcast here, letting everybody know that they can pull out their phone, open the camera app, and use this to just go to askarchispeak.com without you having to type it in. But if you need to use your monkey fingers and type in askarchispeak.com because you don't have your phone or you can't see this QR code, maybe you're listening to the audio version of the podcast.
Right.
QR code fail in that instance, right? So easy to remember domain name, askarchispeak.com. You can ask us a question to be answered on the show. And we have questions in the queue, Cormac. I'm very excited about this. Yeah. So we answered one last week, right? We went right. Deep on an Ask Archispeak question last week. This week, I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to ask you the question. So here, I can take the QR code away.
Okay.
I've heard maybe from you. I can't give away my sources here. That there's an architectural movie out called. Well, I don't know. Is it an architectural movie? Yeah. Scare quotes, air quotes.
Air quotes.
I mean, if it was an architectural movie, it probably would be square quotes. It would be scare quotes. We would align the quotes. Yes, if it's an architectural movie. There's a movie out called The Brutalist, and I've heard from a little birdie that you saw this movie. So
I have seen the movie.
It is true. Wow.
Yes, I have seen the movie.
To get out. I mean, first, let's just start here. What's it like to get out and go see something entertaining? At our advanced age, this happens less and less.
Surprisingly enough, I'm a movie goer, and I enjoy going to the movie theater and the whole movie theater experience. So when movies come out, sure, it's easy to just say, I'll wait for it till. But we just like the process of going to the movies, going and sitting down in the dark. The only movie that I question why we were there after the fact was the movies A Quiet Place. So going to those movies and the movie itself is not making a sound. You can hear every single solitary person
which makes me not want to go to the movies. Who wants to go to the movies and sit through that with other people making noises or every sound that people like? They're not even doing it intentionally most of the time.
Well, I mean,
that sounds terrible.
Maybe somebody should have taught that. Maybe somebody should have taught their kids to chew with their mouth closed.
Totally. Uh, our
You know,
teenagers just chat through a movie. People just talk through a movie. It's
yeah.
ridiculous. This is why movie theaters have to rethink their business model because, like,
Oh my
why would I
goodness.
want to go and do that?
We saw Nosferatu, and there's a lot of like quiet scenes and things like that there, and you can hear people talking here, like seriously,
Oh my
like,
God.
or people complaining about this isn't what I expected. Like, do you do a little bit of
You,
research on the movie that you're going to see?
do you have to say that out loud? Like,
Exactly. Use your inside voice.
keep it
You know,
inside.
yeah, yeah. So I did see it,
Okay.
and it's interesting so because I've been listening to the audiobooks that we've been talking about, like Corb and now onto the Bauhaus and things like that. Um, it's interesting that they used kind of like an amalgamation of bunch of different archetypes, architecture of
Can't even say it.
archetypes. I can't even say it. Stuffy nose. Anyway, of a bunch of different architects, blended all up in a blender and made the power drink of this guy.
Disgusting. Sounds disgusting.
Exactly. Uh, it's what is it? Starkitect Powerade.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's green drink.
something of
Yeah,
that.
it's it's made of people.
I don't. Yeah, that one just went off of the rails there. But anyway,
So this is
so
the Adrian Brody character, and
Adrian Brody
does this
character,
protagonist have a name in the movie?
he's
I just stumped.
yeah,
I just stumped the
Laszlo
reviewer here.
Laszlo something or other.
Toth, isn't it? Toth, something like
Toth.
that.
Yeah, Laszlo
Okay.
Toth. Thank
Okay.
you. And he plays the tortured artist, sort of a kind of a mix, the fountainhead type, kind of like hero architect that doesn't want to give up and lose control of their vision, and everybody, if you don't agree, get off the bus. It's my vision or bust. There's that aspect of it. Then there's like the aspect of, they even say that it's studied at the Bauhaus, and he's making furniture, and it's less tubular steel furniture. And so, you're starting to think of like the Vasily chair from Breuer and all of these other things. And so you're starting to see like all of these different people kind of mixed together, and you kind of have this like almost Corb kind of like character. And it literally is, as you're watching it, you see like these little parts and pieces that they sort of like made a Lego man out of like all sorts of different pieces of people. And that's what made up this character. So it was kind of interesting in that way. And so it was kind of a study of perseverance. It was a study of, I mean, there was architecture in there. Yes. Is it a movie about architecture, like say My Father the Architect or things like that?
It wasn't
It's
a
not like that.
documentary. Yeah.
It's not a documentary.
Uh-huh.
I went with my oldest son, who he's in school for film studies, and I look over at him and I'm like, well, what did you think of it? And so it's long enough where there's an intermission in the middle of the movie,
How
15-minute
long is it?
intermission.
How long is it?
It is 3 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah,
Can we just say like that might be 3 hours and 40 minutes of torture for people who might go see this movie and
it
really
could
not
be.
enjoy it, or was it?
So it
Is
was
it really a
in
polarizing movie from that respect? This episode is made possible with support from TimberTech. The conversation around outdoor spaces is being redefined. TimberTech, everything wood should be, is at the forefront of a technical renaissance in synthetic decking, transforming how architects approach design. TimberTech's advanced materials merge innovative engineering with striking aesthetics. Proprietary polymer capping and precision color blending mimic the natural beauty of hardwood, authentic wood grain patterns, rich tonal depth, and elegant matte finishes. But unlike wood, TimberTech is built to endure, resisting moisture, fading, and even resist wildfires, with warranties that set a new industry standard. Sustainability drives this renaissance. TimberTech boards are composed of up to 85% recycled materials. For every 15 by 15 TimberTech deck, up to 40 full trash bags of recycled PVC are kept out of landfills. A closed-loop manufacturing process ensures these materials support both your designs and the environment. Flexible design options empower your vision. From multi-width boards to heat-bending capabilities, TimberTech pushes the boundaries of what outdoor spaces can achieve, seamlessly blending with the indoor aesthetic. Explore the advancements behind this shift. Visit timbertech.com/architects with an S to access samples and reimagine your next project. TimberTech, everything wood should be. Go check out timbertech.com/architects and check out everything they have to offer, and let them know that you heard about them on the Archispeak podcast. Our thanks to TimberTech for supporting this episode. Now let's get back to the conversation. Is it really a polarizing movie from that respect?
In my opinion, it was kind of a tale of two movies, the before and after intermission. Because after intermission, sort of started to go off the rails a little. And I know that everybody's like, it was definitely beautifully filmed. I mean, it's, a fantastically filmed movie. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, I thought Nosferatu was a beautifully filmed movie. I mean, just the way it was filmed and kind of like the mood that it created. And this one did that as well.
The cinematography, the lighting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The costumes, the settings, all of that.
And this one kind of captured that with the kind of, didn't have necessarily the flowy cape kind of architect, but it was still, you felt kind of like the presence of him. So Adrian Brody, I had no real notes for, other than the fact that there was some storylines, and I don't know how much you want me to give away of anything.
I'm wondering, like, what do you think? I mean, would this conversation be better if we just say spoilers? Spoilers are going to happen.
I could say, well, how about this? They focused on so many different aspects of his life, kind of like his character flaws, his moral behaviors, and all of this other stuff. But they were trying to frame it as the tortured artist. But when it started to kind of go south for me, and this was kind of like the conversation that I was having with my son. So I look over at my son at the very end of the movie. At an intermission, we were both kind of like, okay, this is not bad. I mean, a few things were a little off, but I mean, overall, it's not bad. At the end of the movie, he's like, gave me the whole, he totally gave me a thumbs down. And I'm just
what
like,
about you?
Oh,
what was your?
I wasn't as harsh until we started. I was kind of floating in between. I was with a little bit of Southern movement, but then as we started to talk about it and then dissect, we do this all the time. We sit and we dissect movies, like you and I. So like I went to see The Green Knight with him, and I came back, and as we were like dissecting the movie, I came back and I kind of told you, I was like, oh, you got to see that movie. It's a fantastic movie, beautifully done. There's an interesting metaphors. Like this whole like thing was all about whatever. And if anybody wants to see it, I kind of suggest you go see it.
The Green Knight. How do you spell Knight? I think this was an N-I-G-H-T, or was it with a K?
K.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
K. Okay,
K.
so it's like the knight in shining armor, the Green Knight.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we always do these dissections of movies afterwards. We sit there and talk about it. In this one, we were having a conversation as we're driving home, and ironically enough, as I'm like driving home, I'm driving past some Saarinen buildings and things like that. So like I get to like connect with, oh, look, as I'm driving by, oh, there's the GM Design Center by Saarinen. And,
you're like,
exactly. And then there are these interesting plot devices that they use to talk about a narrative of his character or his morals or his belief and his like tortured artist kind of, but it was just like so odd how they did it. Whereas it was almost as if they said, his character flaw is this, and explained it rather than like show it and kind of like emotionally connect to it. It was like these real quick kind of like, and he's this, and he's this, and he's this. And you're like, that for a 3-hour and 40-minute movie, you think you could have like told the story a little bit differently, a little bit better, where you felt connection with his torture, his pain, his kind of like agony of art and all of these other things. And it was just like, it might have just said on the script, Adrian, you will say that you're a tortured artist. I'm a tortured artist. Seriously, that's how you do it. I mean, like, it was just this, it was so, as we started to dissect the movie, I I started to like it less and less. I was like,
Oh, okay.
man,
I thought you were
I
going to
was
go
like,
the other way.
I
Hmm.
wanted to like the movie. And as we started to talk about it, as we were like, well, why did they do this? You know what? That's a good question. Why did they do that? Well, why
Hmm.
did they do that? And to be quite honest with you, the building, it was sort of shit.
So
I
okay,
kept
so my
saying,
question, finish this thought, but then I have like a
okay,
really, I
they
think like
kept
to the
showing
core
this,
question that I want to ask.
they kept showing this scene where you'd basically go up this ramp, this brutalist building, you'd go up this ramp. So you're up above grade level and you'd go into the building, but you would almost be, you're walking through this. I don't know if it was flooded or whatever, but it was all filled with water and all of the columns and stuff were raw concrete and everything else. And it looked unfinished, but it almost really looked like the basement, not an elevated level. And you're like walking through it, and I just kept saying, what, what's with the water? Like, what's with the water? I kept thinking in my head, I'm like, really?
Was it art?
And
Was this an artistic statement in the movie? Do you think?
it could have been. It wasn't
Maybe you're
obvious.
not. Yeah, maybe you're just not. You're
I
just not there,
might
Cormac.
not be in tune with
Right.
with what they were
With
saying. And it's so interesting because I am one who doesn't like to sit and read reviews ahead of time. And you and I were talking about this beforehand, and you're like, well, I've heard sort of hit or miss reviews on it. And myself heard hit or miss reviews on it. I'm like, I don't really care.
Well, so
Peop-
here's what I experienced, and I wanted to bring this up, so I'm glad you said that. I've actually heard people, and I didn't look at any content about this, like reviews. I did not look up actual critique of the movie by movie critics. It was just
Okay.
people mostly posting on the Entree Architect Facebook page saying, "Did anybody see this movie?" And then I would see a comment as I was trying to scroll past it because I
Right.
didn't want to know about the movie.
Right.
And the comment says like, "I walked out on the movie," or "I left at the intermission," or
Yeah.
I wish I could get that time back in my life. And this was not. I don't want to give anybody the idea that that was most of the comments because it wasn't. It was just a
Yeah.
few that stood out to me. So I don't know kind of the general sense. I'm getting a better sense from you,
I
but I
was
wanted to bring that up because I'm just curious. Like, could you see why that would be the case?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, as we were walking out, actually, I did notice that there were people who left at intermission. Because it, I look at it this way. I mean, not very many. I watch good movies, bad movies, and everything in between. I mean,
Mhm.
I can actually be entertained by watching Birdemic, mostly because it's an absolutely absurd movie with horrible graphics, horrible acting, and it's just absolute garbage. However, it's kind of like when you're driving past a car wreck that you just gotta stop and like stare at it. Movies like that, I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna give it, like Sharknado. I've seen all the Sharknados. They're horrible. Acting is horrible and everything else. And you look at him and you're like, wait, how did you have this like very successful career? This is where you landed. But it almost became kind of a joke. And then everybody was just like, oh, it's so terrible. I want to be in that movie. And so you got bigger and bigger actors in those movies. And so it just became kind of more of like a joke than anything else. Then I feel like the first one sort of meant to be serious ish, maybe, but then it went off the rails, but it went off on the rails on purpose.
Yeah.
This one, I feel like they had a bag of tricks of like all sorts of different plot devices to kind of tell this story of this tortured artist, architect, master, maestro, the Starchitect. And instead of like deciding on a few, they just said, oh, we're going to use them all.
Mm.
And you're like, you didn't have to. Like the way that you told some of the story was like sort of almost unnecessary that you even showed that part.
Hmm.
You're like, he didn't have to do that. Like and again, I don't really want to throw out spoilers. I hate throwing out spoilers. I never spoil a movie for somebody that hasn't already seen it or is thinking about it. But the way that I'm talking about it in kind of a slightly negative, like, is it slightly or
It's
pretty
pretty
knee
negative.
deep into yeah,
I
pretty
mean,
negative.
but if you didn't like it, you didn't like it. Like everybody
Well,
is going to have their own
it's
opinion, but
so it's like I said, it is a tale of two movies. Before the intermission, I actually was kind of enjoying it. And if it would have kept that same kind of feeling, it might have been okay. Um, there was one character, the son of the Guy Pearce played basically the benefactor to him, kind of like found him. He was working. This isn't that much of a spoiler because it kind of like shows it in some of the trailers, but he was working non-architectural odd labor jobs and all that other stuff. He found him and he said, is this you? Like you're an amazing architect. Why are you doing this? And so I think that, it's like, oh, wow, he's got this kind of like rebirth of his career now that he's this big time architect in Europe. He flees Europe. He comes to America, this kind of in the post World War II, and can't find work. And honestly, we've heard that story a lot from other architects. And so that's why I said it was this kind of amalgamation of like multiple different architects and multiple different like root stories of those architects. And so you're like, okay, I can see where this is going. It's kind of a cool story and all this other stuff. And then intermission hits, and then you're like taking your little break and you're stretching and all this other stuff. And then you kind of come back in and you sit down and you're like, and then it just kind of goes weird. Like it just goes like, not weird in like, oh, like Dr. Calgary, I can't even remember how to pronounce it, but, or like Brasilia, or, these like the weird movies, like The Belly of an Architect, those kind of movies. Did you ever see
mm,
any of those?
I
Just
saw Brazil. Yeah,
Brazil. Okay. So yeah,
yeah.
Brazil. Why did I say Brasilia? I know what I was talking about.
You
Which
knew what you meant. I knew what you meant.
it wasn't like that. It was just like,
It
why,
wasn't a
why,
Terry
how
Gilliam
is,
movie. Yeah.
yeah, it was just like, why are you telling the story this way? I see what you're trying to do with the story, but this is a really weird way of telling it. And it was kind of in a lot of cases that was just unnecessary. Like, you didn't need this. You really didn't need
Mm.
that. And that's where it was really off-putting to a lot of people. And that's when I started watching people walking out, is when they started doing like these, what I felt like were unnecessary plot devices. That's when they were like, I'm out kind of thing. And my son wanted to see it to the end because as a student in film studies, he wanted to
He's
just
a
kind of understand what
completionist.
was going on.
Yeah.
And he was, like I said, he was like very critical about it at the end. And, kind of our conversation about like dissecting it, it was a really good conversation about just like, why did they do this? Why did they do that? I was looking at it kind of in an architectural manner. And it's just like, I want to see more about the struggles with the client and this other stuff and kind of like trying to hold true to the root of his art. And then he like brings out the model and he sets the model out. And I swear to you, in my head, I'm like, what the is that?
Okay, what do you mean? What was wrong with it?
Well, it was probably the most rudimentary model I'd ever seen. And I'm talking about like, think about in architecture school when you're doing a massing model and you're throwing together like this big massing model with hot glue and chipboard and all of this other stuff, and you didn't cut in your windows or anything else. And he's just like, that quality of a model just in white museum board, kind of like threw it out there and said, this is my creation. And you're just looking at the creation is like, dude, like that is half baked at best.
Here's what you say. Yeah, that's when you get a looks good start over, or it was a
Exactly.
first. That was a good first pass. Like that's a polite
Yeah.
way to say this sucks. This is terrible.
Or when you'd have like one of my professors who'd like, while he's sitting at your desk, he's looking at your model and stuff. And then he just starts looking around and you're like, what are you looking around for? He's like, looking. And then he like leans over, he picks something up off the ground and he kind of like twists it and bunches it up and he sits it on top of your model. He's like, there, isn't that better? Like,
You just put
so
trash on
you
my model.
so you looked for a garbage hat to put on the head of my model to say that it was better.
Oh my god.
That I kind of wish that, you know,
Could have done that.
Doug, yeah, my professor Doug Burleson was around to do that to that model. I don't know if you remember this kind of like little comedy skit that was going around of the Starchitect. They would show like all of these different
Yes.
clips and stuff, and
Yes.
he like pick
And
up a
he
garbage
liked,
can and he sit.
yes, he liked
Yeah,
the garbage can.
that was. So think about that garbage can moment. He's like,
Nice.
there. What do you think? And like he's presenting it in front of the town council and all this other stuff, and I did kind of like there was moments where you can really, as an architect, you can like kind of associate with like everything that he's feeling, because like people are like gobsmacked. They're like, "What the hell is that?" kind of thing, and you're just like, "You don't know art. How dare you?" It's just like, but then you're looking at the model and you're like, I get their reactions.
So, how important was it, or why? I mean, I don't know if you know the history of the writing of this movie. I heard it took him quite a long time to actually make this movie before they started doing like the festival circuit stuff. It was something like 7 years in the making, or maybe that was even just the writing period. I didn't follow it that closely. But
Maybe you should have
how
had an
important?
intermission in between them.
Yeah.
Go
How
ahead.
important was it, do you think, that the protagonist was an architect and it was architecture related? Like, what
You know,
is it about this story that made that the way that they decided to tell it?
it in a way to me felt like a modernist, brutalist retelling of the Fountainhead. The
I wonder if they would
and
agree with that.
they
The
probably
writer
wouldn't,
director. Yeah.
but if you think about Howard Rourke and his kind of like stance of it's my way, the highway, got fired multiple times, career dip, all of this other stuff, they kind of like had that same kind of path for him, for Adrian's character, that you were just like, I can see the connections between the tortured architect, the people just not understanding what he's trying to accomplish and all that other stuff. And kind of this, I'll show them kind of effect, that I'll show you like, the best thing that you've ever seen, this emotional experience and all of that other stuff. And you may not get it when you see it, but when you experience it, it's going to be that. If they played that a little bit better, kind of like that storyline, to me, I think it would have the second half of the movie, because I feel like the first half of the movie before intermission was sort of leading to that kind of like, all right, you just don't understand me. I'll show you kind of thing. And then people are like, oh my God, dude is great. We should have listened to him kind of thing, or we should have given him more credit or whatever. It didn't go that direction. It literally just kept him torturing. And then here is a spoiler alert. He they basically use as a plot device to tell a story that I feel was very unnecessary, of him being a heroin addict. And sorry if I'm ruining the movie for this, but this was a reoccurring device that they were using to illustrate his torturedness. And like, there's other ways of doing that that really kind of enhance the story of the tortured artist architect. Like I said, unappreciated and misunderstood kind of like thing, instead of just showing him that this is a way to deal with my pain kind of thing. That's when it started to go off the rails. I'm like, you don't have to. I don't know. I was
Went
being
too
a little
far.
hypercritical, and I was just like, I don't believe that this. Now I don't feel sorry for him anymore. Like I wanted to feel sorry for him. I wanted to like understand and feel the pain, because we all feel kind of like the pain when somebody says you're like spend all night long working and working and working and doing something. And then somebody comes by, oh, that looks fine. And you're like, a dagger to the heart. That really hurts, because fine is like the death knell word to me when you're like slaving over something and somebody's like, it's all right kind of thing.
Right.
I wanted them to play that kind of story, because they were trying to tell that story as the tortured artist, but they then told it where it was just like, it started to become unappealing to me that his struggle was anything more than a self-inflicted wound of his own ego.
Hmm.
It was just like, now he's I'm going to keep it clean so I don't have to
Yeah.
edit out some things. But anyway,
So why the brutalist? Why brutalism? What do you think the why did that stick?
I
Because it
think
could
in
have.
a way that device of that particular type of architecture probably was again to try to like amplify the misunderstood,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
misunderstood artist. And I truly, and so it worked, and that was a
Did
good
they
part of it. I just wish that they would have played that a little bit more.
did they explain brutalism at all in the
No,
movie? Like if
no,
somebody went in
no, no,
not
no, no, no,
knowing
no,
what
no,
that meant, so they're not coming out with any
no.
new information there.
Any non-architect who didn't know what brutalism was or didn't understand that would have looked at this building and basically said, what the hell is that thing? This big, massive, monstrous kind of like sitting on top of a hill, concrete, windowless form with these big, massive towers and stuff on there. They would just look at it and say, what the hell is this? And I kind of don't necessarily think that that was a bad thing because the reaction to the work as he was presenting it to the non-architect or the non like art appreciator was very much the same way as what you got from the audience. And that actually worked well. And I was okay with that. Like the way that they did it, it was kind of cool because again, it was all about the misunderstanding, underappreciated, tortured artist. You don't understand what I'm trying to do. When people looked at Pollock's work and they're just like, what the, I could do that kind of thing. I don't understand it. You know, what the hell am I looking at kind of thing? And that was kind of the intent of not really explaining the evolution of what brutalism is or things like that. And so, you know, they showed like some of his early work and they showed him being an architect from the Bauhaus. They showed very Bauhausian kind of like work that was in Europe. And when he was building furniture and stuff, he was doing very Bauhausian, like the Vasily chair and things like that. That was like his creations or was that kind of work. And so they showed that modernist kind of like, you know, early works. And if you think about it, like it's interesting, like if you use Breuer as a good example, you know, because they kind of used him as an example of, you know, like how he sort of evolved. I mean, Breuer's known as a brutalist. I live in a town that has a library done by Marcel Breuer, and it is nowhere near brutalist. It is modernist to modernist hilt. It is brick. It is big glass. It is a Calder sculpture that was built for that particular space. It is amazing. I love it. It, you know, it's not like anything to write home about. It's a good, competent, very nice modernist building done by Marcel Breuer. But you don't think of him that way. You think of him as a brutalist. And okay, so like we don't really know what was he following the fashion of other architects. I mean, because you don't even think you're like there's Saarinen. We think about all these different things, but he was a brutalist. He did a lot of brutalist buildings. Kahn, all these other ones. You look at their early work in the transition. So you know, I'm going off on a little tangent here, but you see what I'm saying is like you don't really see that kind of like the
It didn't
evolution
define
of
them.
like
That
why they
that
went from
style.
it
Yeah.
didn't define it, right? And so I
Right.
think this one was just his way of like capturing an emotion, capturing this overall feeling. And the way that he explained it, I was excited to see the building. And they never really kind of like showed you those few things, except for at the end, they were talking about this very, not at the end, but kind of nearing the completion of the building. There was some events that happened, and then they went into the building, kind of like this center space where the skylight was coming through and shining down on a focal point, and beautifully done, beautifully filmed. Cinematography was great. Staging, lighting, all of that stuff was like well done. And it kind of like captured the emotion that he was trying to go for with the building. And so I don't necessarily think, from a positive view, I don't really necessarily think they needed like all of the architecture to really kind of like talk about this tortured architect.
Hmm.
Um, I just think that some of the things that they used to depict him as the tortured architect were either too quickly done and resolved that he wanted it to kind of be pulled out a little. Yes, it was a 3 hour and 40-minute long movie, but maybe you could have made some choices of not showing some things and showing other things that kind of stretch them out a little bit more, so you understood the pain, the agony of like the desire to create and things like that. And you just didn't get satisfied, the satisfaction of resolution on like all of the things, because they had a big old box of like a bunch of things in his head. And instead of like editing it out, he just threw it all in there. And you're just like, you didn't have to. It's like, you think about us when we go through our process, when we like got 1,001 different ideas, but of course
Yep.
you're not going to present 1,001 ideas to the client. You got to edit down. And
Right.
I feel like he sort of missed that memo about editing down all of his ideas.
Man. I don't get to go out to the movies that often, but I just rewatched the other night. We did watch a movie and we watched Inception again.
Eh,
And that has
I-
got to be, to me, one of the best movies ever made. And it's just absolutely so detailed and incredible, and there's so much depth to it. And I mean, it's a longer movie. It's not that
yeah.
long. There's no intermission.
Yeah.
And I imagine that like to get to the level of that has got to be really
Mhm.
difficult, to get to that kind of
Yeah.
level of being able to craft a story, put it on a big screen, make an incredible score, have an incredible cast, all those things. Like, this
Yeah.
is not your first movie. And I'm pretty sure that the movie that you're talking about is probably not that writer director's first movie either. Do you know
Right.
any of that person, of his history that
I
led up to
don't.
this?
My son was telling me a couple of movies that this director has done before, and I wasn't familiar with them, and he's
Okay.
seen them, and that's why he was somewhat disappointed in like these other movies that he's done were actually so much better than this one,
But he talked
because
about this as if it was
because
like his life's work. Like, this was really a
his like
pinnacle
magnum
movie for
opus.
him. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that, since you bring up Inception, one of the things that's really interesting about Chris Nolan and his work is that he's got an idea, and it's the big idea, and he world builds around that idea, but everything is there to support the idea, and it doesn't really distract from or take away from kind of like that goal, that main
It's the
point.
partie diagram. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And it's just like
yeah.
everything that you do is in support of that idea. And if it doesn't support, or if it's confusing to it, then it's kind of
Gone.
pointless. And
Yeah.
so he is a master at editing out the pointless thoughts about what's next and stuff. I mean, I've grown an appreciation for Inception that when I first saw it, and I didn't like the movie, but then again, I'm not a big fan of the lead actor in the movie, and kind of shy away from a lot of his movies. But then as he gets older, his acting is less contrived, in my opinion, and more it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's evolved, he's gotten better. And not very many people share my opinion about that. So it's just like I've shied away from a lot of those movies. But then you and I have talked about this and my initial disdain for Inception, and then I think you chastised me once for you said, "Oh, you got to give it another shot" or something like that. Can't recall, and I did, and it is a beautifully done, interesting movie. I still have
You're not
issues
gonna.
with
You're not saying it's
I,
the
I
best movie ever made.
I still have issues with DiCaprio, but whatever. Like, but other than that, though, it's an amazing movie. It is. There's no holes in it, though, and that's the big difference between, say, that and The Brutalist, is that, or at least to me, I understood what I thought was the big idea of the movie. And the problem that I had is that I couldn't see some of the things that he used to tell the story of that big idea. Like, there was like no point to them. There was like, they didn't support the story. They were distractions, or they were superfluous.
Mm,
It's like, you don't need that. Like,
mm,
that wasn't necessary. Like, that doesn't tell the story or doesn't support the story. And you're just like, I mean, but that was, again, me. And in here, okay, so this is something that's kind of interesting is last semester, when I was teaching the students about how to work on their final presentation, I said, you control the narrative. Everything that you create in your presentations has to support that narrative. If you feel like it's kind of like going off in one direction or another, and you've got these tangents going on. Chop them off, get rid of them. Don't tell that story. Tell the story that you're trying to tell. Don't do anything more. This movie did that. They tried to do too much to tell. It's just like, but this and this, but also this. Don't forget this kind of thing. You're just like, dude, stop. Enough. You know,
I
it's like
think
the shiny red ball. Squirrel.
That's the different. Yeah, and that's the difference between like trying to be clever and show
Yeah.
everybody everything,
Yeah.
beating them over the head with all the tricks that you know,
Exactly.
versus
Yeah.
clarity. Right?
Yeah, it's
Clarity
just
is
like,
the opposite of that.
and it's like some Starchitects that kind of do that as well. It's just like sometimes I kind of critically say, "Oh, look, it's gimmicky architecture," because I'm trying all the tricks in my bag, and you're like, I see what you were trying to do. It's just it's really weird how you got there, and all of the stuff that's supporting it is just like that's not needed. That's not necessary.
Well,
Why?
you're also a very practical project architect, Cormac. I mean, you don't like flair.
Ouch.
You don't like flair. I know you.
I like cleanliness. I like
Yes, you do.
clarity.
You do. No, that's fine. And that's fine.
Yeah,
So I'm interested to I feel like I have to check this movie out and then
you do.
we have to
You do.
chat again. Yeah.
We've got to revisit this. I'd love for you to watch it and just have that. Honestly,
You're not
it would have
making
been
me feel good about wanting to watch it, just so you know.
no.
Now I feel like this
right,
is
it's true.
mandatory homework at this point.
Now it's just like, that mandatory reading assignment is like, man,
Right.
all right, fine, I'll do this. You know,
Yes.
so I got done with the core book.
Oh yeah.
He
Yeah.
he didn't endear himself to me,
It didn't come back. He didn't.
but
The phoenix
I will.
did not rise from the ashes that were
Well,
created.
what is okay? So what is really interesting? Let's real quick blurb on that one
Let's
though.
put the final nail in this coffin. Yes.
I think honestly, his magnum opus, if we're going to talk about those kind of things, is Chandigarh and the city planning and all of that other stuff. It
Right.
is interesting, however, like if you think about like how he designed it and how you think about urban and community planning as it's evolved since then, there's some really interesting, beautiful architecture in there. But it, as a whole, is almost a Pollock painting in a way. There's a lot going on here, and there's not a lot of clarity to like this whole thing. But his whole desire was this straight grid clarity, telling the story of pure, clean modernism and all of this other stuff. And it just didn't, in my opinion, come out that way. Like he tried to, it was another one of those, like I tried every trick in my toolbox of here's everything that I know and I'm going to throw it right at it. It was just like, much like the Brutalist movie, you almost like, why, man? Why?
Too much.
Like,
too much.
Too much. And again,
Tried too hard. You tried
again,
too hard. Yeah.
Pierre's the hero, man. Pierre is what, like, there needs to be somebody who
The
dedicates
unsung hero.
some deep academic study on Pierre and his role in the success of Corp. Because if it was not for him, man, I don't think you'd have the same kind of like academic impression of Corp.
Mm.
Because that guy, he knew what he was doing.
That was the actual guy. Yeah.
And he wasn't a fascist.